Emma Grayson's heart thudded in her chest as she watched the stagecoach disappear into the distance, leaving her stranded in the dusty outpost of Platteville, Colorado, with nothing but two heavy trunks and the promise of a new life that now seemed as barren as the plains stretching before her. The year was 1878, and the late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small western town. Emma dabbed her forehead with a handkerchief, her full figure already uncomfortable in the tight corset and heavy traveling dress she'd worn from Boston. The stagecoach had deposited her unceremoniously at the depot, the driver muttering something about her fare only covering this far, despite her protests that she'd paid to reach her aunt's ranch 15 miles outside of town. "Madam, you look like you could use some assistance." Emma turned to find a tall, broad-shouldered man approaching. His face was partially shadowed by a worn leather hat, but she could see kind blue eyes studying her with concern. His clothes were dusty from the trail denim trousers, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned, muscular forearms, and a weathered vest. "I'm Xavier Larson," he said with a slight tip of his hat. "Most folks call me Xav." "Emma Grayson," she replied, straightening her posture despite her exhaustion. "I seem to have been left rather stranded. The coach was supposed to take me all the way to my Aunt Martha's ranch." "Martha Wilkins?" he asked, recognition lighting his features. Emma nodded. "You know her?" "Everyone knows Martha. Her ranch is a fair piece from town." He glanced at her trunks, then back at her flushed face. "I can arrange transport for you if you'd like." Relief washed over Emma. "That would be most appreciated, Mr. Larson." "Just Xav," he corrected with a smile that transformed his weather-beaten face. "I'll see about getting you a horse from the livery." Emma bit her lip. "I should confess I'm not much of a rider. In Boston, I rarely had occasion." Xav's eyes took in her figure not unkindly, but with practical assessment. "Don't worry about that. Let me handle the arrangements. You look like you could use something cool to drink. The Mercantile across the way serves lemonade." 20 minutes later, feeling somewhat refreshed by the tart lemonade, Emma stood outside the livery stable watching as Xav spoke with the stable master, a grizzled old man named Hank. "Madam," Hank said, approaching her with Xav, "we've got a problem. The saddle I've got available won't accommodate." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "What Mr. Jenkins is trying to say," Xav interjected smoothly, "is that the standard saddle might not be suitable for your comfort on a long ride." Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She knew what they were implying. Her substantial curves were too much for a regular saddle. All her life she'd faced such moments, the sidelong glances and whispered comments about her size. She'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the West might be different. "I see," she said stiffly, fighting back tears of humiliation. "Now, don't you worry none," Hank said quickly. "Ain't your fault. These saddles were made for men half-starved on the trail, not proper ladies." Xav was already shaking his head. "It's no matter. I'll bring around Goliath instead of Rascal." "Goliath?" Emma asked. "My draft horse. He's strong enough to carry twice your weight without breaking a sweat and gentle as a lamb." Xav's expression remained neutral, not a hint of judgment in his eyes. "And we'll use my spare saddle. It's broader and more comfortable for longer journeys anyway." Emma watched as he disappeared into the stable, returning minutes later, leading an enormous Belgian draft horse with a golden coat that gleamed in the sunlight. The horse was magnificent, at least 18 hands high, with powerful muscles rippling beneath his shining hide. "This is Goliath," Xav said with obvious pride, patting the horse's massive neck. "He's the strongest horse in the county." Rather than feeling insulted, Emma found herself drawn to the magnificent animal. "He's beautiful," she breathed, tentatively reaching out to touch his velvety nose. The horse nickered softly, pushing against her hand. "He likes you," Xav noted with approval. "That's a good sign." While Hank and another stable boy loaded Emma's trunks onto a small cart hitched to a sturdy mule, Xav fitted Goliath with a wide western saddle. He worked efficiently, his movements sure and practiced. "Have you known my aunt long?" Emma asked, watching him. "Since I was a boy," Xav replied. "My pa worked her ranch for years before he passed. I've got my own spread now just north of hers." He tightened the cinch. "Martha's good people, tough as nails but fair. She wrote that she needed help with the books," Emma explained. "After my parents died last winter, there wasn't much keeping me in Boston. I was a bookkeeper for my father's shipping business." Xav nodded, seemingly impressed. "Martha could use someone with a head for figures. She's been having trouble with the bank lately." When everything was ready, Xav turned to her. "Now for the tricky part." He looked her up and down, considering. "I'm going to boost you up. Just put your foot in my hands and I'll do the rest." Emma hesitated only briefly, before gathering her skirts in one hand and placing her boot in his interlaced fingers. With surprising gentleness for such a powerfully built man, Xav lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all, settling her onto the saddle. The wide seat was comfortable, cradling her figure perfectly. Emma arranged her skirts as modestly as possible, grateful for the sense of security the substantial horse provided beneath her. "How does that feel?" Xav asked, looking up at her. "Surprisingly comfortable," she admitted. "Though I fear I must look ridiculous perched atop such a giant." "Not at all," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. "You look like you belong there." He mounted his own horse, a sleek chestnut quarter horse, and took the lead rope for the mule cart. "It's about 2 hours to your aunt's place. We should get moving if we want to arrive before dark." As they rode out of town, Emma found herself stealing glances at her unexpected rescuer. There was something compelling about Xavier Larson that went beyond his kind assistance. Unlike the men she'd known in Boston, he seemed utterly comfortable in his own skin, with no pretense or artificial manners. His hands were calloused from hard work, his face tanned from the sun, but there was an intelligence in his blue eyes that suggested depths beyond the typical cowboy. The trail wound through rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush and occasional stands of cottonwood trees. The vastness of the landscape both intimidated and exhilarated Emma. Back east, buildings and people had always hemmed her in. Here the land stretched endlessly toward mountains that seemed painted on the horizon. "It's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. "Gets in your blood," Xav agreed, following her gaze. "Can't imagine living anywhere else now." "Were you born here?" He shook his head. "Pennsylvania originally. My folks came west when I was 10, looking for better opportunities. Pa worked ranches until he saved enough to buy our homestead." A shadow crossed his face. "Lost him to pneumonia 5 years back. Ma followed the next winter." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "I know how that feels." Their eyes met in shared understanding of grief. "Your aunt said you were coming, but she didn't mention when," Xav said, changing the subject. "She would have sent someone to meet you if she'd known. My letter probably hasn't arrived yet." I decided rather suddenly to accept her invitation. Emma adjusted her position in the saddle, growing more comfortable with the motion of the massive horse beneath her. "I had to leave Boston rather hastily." Xav raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. "Well, whatever brought you here, Martha will be glad to have you. She doesn't admit it, but running that ranch alone has been wearing on her." "Is it just her?" "Her and a few hands. Since your uncle passed, she's been managing everything herself. Stubborn woman refuses to sell, even though that banker Harrison has been circling like a vulture." Banker Harrison. Zav's expression darkened. Theodore Harrison owns the bank in Platteville and half the businesses. Been buying up ranches all over the county, especially those struggling after last year's drought. The conversation continued as they rode, Zav pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emma felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. Despite the unexpected complications of her arrival, despite the embarrassment at the livery stable, she couldn't help feeling that perhaps she'd found the fresh start she so desperately needed. An hour into their journey, they stopped by a small creek to water the horses. Zav helped Emma down, his strong hands at her waist making her heart flutter unexpectedly. Her legs were sore from the unaccustomed riding, and she stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground. "Easy there," he said, steadying her. "First long ride is always the hardest. Might want to stretch your legs a bit." Emma walked gingerly along the creek bank, working the stiffness from her muscles while Zav tended to the horses. The water burbled pleasantly over smooth stones, and grasshoppers buzzed in the tall grass. It was peaceful in a way Boston had never been. "Your aunt's going to be surprised," Zav said as he refilled their canteens. "But pleased, I think. She's been lonely since your uncle died." "I barely remember him," Emma admitted. "They visited us in Boston when I was very young, but that was the only time I met them. My father and Uncle William had some sort of falling out years ago." "Family's complicated," Zav said with a shrug. "But Martha's good-hearted. Whatever happened between your pa and her husband, she won't hold it against you." When they resumed their journey, the setting sun cast long shadows across the prairie. Emma found herself growing increasingly comfortable on Goliath's broad back, even enjoying the gentle rocking motion of his gait. Zav rode beside her now, pointing out a hawk circling overhead or a distant herd of pronghorn antelope. "Have you always worked with horses?" she asked, admiring the easy way he sat in the saddle as if he were part of the animal beneath him. "Since I could walk," he replied with a smile. "Pa said I could gentle a Mustang before I could properly tie my shoes." His expression grew more serious. "I breed and train them now. Got a small operation, but growing, specializing in draft crosses that can handle ranch work but have more endurance than pure drafts. Like Goliath. Goliath's my prize. Half Belgian, quarter Morgan, quarter thoroughbred, strong as an ox but can outrun most quarter horses over distance." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "Been offered small fortunes for him, but some things aren't for sale." Emma found herself smiling at his passion. There was something refreshing about a man who valued things beyond their monetary worth. In Boston, especially in her father's business circles, everything and everyone had a price. As twilight deepened into dusk, lights appeared in the distance. "That's Martha's place," Zav said, pointing to a collection of buildings nestled in a small valley. "Willow Creek Ranch, one of the prettiest spots in the county." Even in the fading light, Emma could see why he said so. A creek lined with willow trees cut through rolling pastureland. The ranch house was substantial, a two-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and corrals held horses and cattle. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, holding up a lantern. She was tall and straight-backed, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun, her silhouette sharp against the yellow light spilling from the house. "Who's coming?" she called, her voice strong and carrying. "It's Xavier Larson, Martha," Zav called back. "And I've brought you a surprise." They rode into the yard, and Martha Wilkins stepped down from the porch, holding her lantern high to illuminate their faces. Her weathered features registered shock when she recognized Emma. "Good Lord above," she breathed. Little Emma Grayson. "Hello, Aunt Martha," Emma said, suddenly nervous. What if her aunt didn't truly want her here? What if the invitation had been mere politeness? But then Martha was striding forward, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Well, don't just sit up there like a queen on her throne. Get down here and give your old aunt a proper greeting." Xav was already dismounting, moving to help Emma down. When her feet touched the ground, Martha enveloped her in a fierce hug that smelled of bread and lavender soap. "Look at you," Martha said, holding Emma at arm's length. "The spitting image of your mother, God rest her soul." Her keen eyes noted Emma's travel-worn appearance. "You must be exhausted, child. Come inside. I'll have Fiona heat water for a bath." She turned to Xav. "And you, Xavier Larson, where did you find my niece?" "Stranded at the depot," he explained, removing his hat. "Stagecoach left her there instead of bringing her all the way out." Martha clicked her tongue in disapproval. "That Reynolds and his shortcuts. I'll have words with him next time I'm in town." She looked back at Emma. "Well, it's fortunate Xav found you. Come inside, both of you. There's stew keeping warm, and you'll both stay the night, Xav. It's too dark to be riding back to your place now." As Emma followed her aunt toward the house, she glanced back over her shoulder. Xav stood by Goliath, his hand on the horse's neck, watching her. When their eyes met, he smiled a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes and did something peculiar to Emma's heart. For the first time since leaving Boston, Emma felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. Perhaps this new life wouldn't be so terrifying after all. The ranch house was warm and inviting, with handmade quilts draped over sturdy furniture and kerosene lamps casting a golden glow. Martha introduced Emma to Fiona, a middle-aged woman with a friendly Irish accent who served as cook and housekeeper. Within minutes, Emma found herself seated at a large oak table with a bowl of savory beef stew and a slice of fresh baked bread before her. Xav joined them after seeing to the horses, bringing in Emma's smaller trunk. He washed up at the basin by the door, then took a seat across from Emma. In the lamplight, she could see his features more clearly: strong jaw covered with a day's stubble, straight nose, and those startlingly blue eyes under dark brows. Martha peppered Emma with questions about her journey and her life in Boston, while Xav ate quietly, occasionally adding a comment or question of his own. It felt strangely comfortable, this impromptu dinner with her aunt and the cowboy who'd rescued her from her predicament. "So you'll help me make sense of these accounts?" Martha asked eventually, gesturing toward a cluttered desk in the corner of the sitting room. "I'm afraid numbers were always William's territory. Since he passed, I've made a proper mess of the bookkeeping." "Of course," Emma assured her. "That's why I came. I managed my father's books for years." Martha nodded approvingly. "Good. That banker Harrison has been making noises about calling in our loan, says my payments have been inconsistent." She snorted. "The man's a snake, looking to gobble up every acre in the county." "He's been putting pressure on all the smaller ranchers," Xav added, his expression grim. "Raised interest rates last year during the drought when folks could least afford it." "But enough about that unpleasantness," Martha declared, rising. "Emma, you must be dead on your feet. Fiona's prepared the blue room for you, and there's hot water for a bath in the washroom." The mention of a bath nearly brought tears to Emma's eyes. After days of travel in the same clothes, she felt grimy and disheveled. Martha led her upstairs to a cozy bedroom decorated in shades of blue and cream, with a 4-poster bed and a small writing desk beneath a window. "The washroom's just down the hall," Martha said, squeezing Emma's hand. "Take your time. We'll talk more in the morning." After the most blissful bath of her life in a copper tub before a small fireplace, Emma changed into a clean nightgown and wrapper. She was brushing out her long chestnut hair when a soft knock came at her door. "Yes," she called, tightening her wrapper. Martha peeked in. "Everything to your liking, dear. It's perfect," Emma assured her. "I can't thank you enough for taking me in like this." Martha came fully into the room, closing the door behind her. Her shrewd eyes studied Emma. "Your family, child. No thanks needed." She hesitated. "Though I admit I'm curious about the timing of your arrival. Your last letter mentioned coming in the spring, yet here you are barely into autumn." Emma's hand stilled on her hairbrush. She'd known this question would come, but had hoped for more time to prepare her explanation. There was a situation, she began haltingly. "A man, Mr. Everett Bradford. He was a business associate of father's who showed interest in me after the funeral. At first I was flattered by his attention. He's wealthy, well-connected." "But," Martha prompted gently. "But once father's estate was settled, it became clear that the shipping company was worth far less than anyone expected. Father had debts." Emma swallowed hard. "Mr. Bradford's interest cooled considerably when he learned I wouldn't be bringing a substantial dowry to the marriage. When I confronted him, he made it clear that he might still be willing to marry me if I proved, accommodating to his wishes before the wedding." Martha's face darkened. "The scoundrel!" "I refused, of course," Emma continued, her cheeks burning at the memory, "but he became insistent. Threatening, even. He had influence in Boston, connections that could ruin what little reputation our family name had left. So I sold what I could, paid off the most pressing debts, and used the remaining funds to come here." She looked up at her aunt. "I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, but I had nowhere else to go." Martha crossed to Emma and wrapped her arms around her. "You did exactly right, child. This is your home for as long as you want it." She pulled back, her expression fierce. "And if that Bradford fellow ever shows his face around here, he'll find himself looking down the barrel of my shotgun." Emma laughed despite herself, tension draining from her shoulders. "Thank you, Aunt Martha. Now, get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to make you a proper Colorado rancher's niece." Martha patted her cheek. "And I saw how Xavier was looking at you. That boy's never looked at any woman that way before." "Aunt Martha," Emma protested, feeling heat rise in her cheeks again. "He was simply being kind." "Kind, my foot," Martha snorted. "I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. He doesn't bring out Goliath for just anyone." With a knowing smile, she headed for the door. "Sleep well, dear." After her aunt left, Emma stood by the window looking out at the moonlit landscape. In the distance, she could see mountains silhouetted against the star-filled sky. It was all so vast, so different from the cramped streets and rigid society of Boston. Below, movement caught her eye. Xav was crossing the yard toward the barn where he would sleep. He paused, looking up at the house, and for a moment Emma thought he might have seen her. Then he continued on, disappearing into the shadows. Emma climbed into the soft bed, her body aching pleasantly from the day's ride. As she drifted toward sleep, her last conscious thought was of blue eyes and strong hands, and the strange feeling of rightness she'd experienced in the cowboy's presence. Morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains Emma had forgotten to close. For a moment she was disoriented, then remembered Colorado. Her aunt's ranch. A new beginning. She dressed in one of her simpler dresses, a forest green cotton with minimal bustle and trim. After pinning her hair in a practical coil at the nape of her neck, she made her way downstairs, following the aroma of coffee and bacon. In the kitchen, she found Martha and Fiona preparing breakfast. Through the window, she could see men moving about the yard, ranch hands beginning their day's work. "There you are," Martha said with approval. "I was beginning to think you might sleep till noon. City folk often do on their first night out here." "I've never been one for lying abed," Emma replied, accepting a cup of coffee from Fiona. "There's too much to see and learn." "That's the spirit," Martha nodded. "Xavier's already been up for hours, checking that ornery mare of mine that's about to foal. Says she's close." Emma tried to ignore the little jump her heart gave at the mention of his name. "Will he be joining us for breakfast?" "Said he needed to get back to his own place," Martha replied, watching Emma's face. "But he'll be by tomorrow to help with moving some cattle." She raised an eyebrow. "Funny, he doesn't usually volunteer for that job." Emma busied herself with her coffee cup, avoiding her aunt's knowing look. After breakfast, Martha showed her around the ranch, the barn with its horses and milk cows, the chicken coop, the bunkhouse where the 4 ranch hands lived, the corrals and small smithy. It was a well-organized operation, if showing signs of needing maintenance in places. William had plans to expand, Martha explained as they walked back toward the house. "Started building that new barn before his heart gave out. Never finished it," she sighed. "Been hard to keep up with everything since then." "Is that why you wrote to me about the books?" Emma asked. Martha nodded. "Partly, but also because I knew you might need a fresh start after your parents passed." She squeezed Emma's hand. "I lost touch with your father after he and William quarreled, but your mother wrote to me occasionally. I knew things weren't always easy." In the sitting room, Martha showed Emma the ledgers and account books stacked on the desk. "It's all a muddle to me. William handled all this. I can run a ranch, doctor a sick calf, and shoot the eye out of a rattlesnake at 50 paces, but these figures might as well be Chinese for all the sense I can make of them." Emma spent the morning sorting through the books, quickly seeing the problem. While her aunt had dutifully recorded income and expenses, she'd made calculation errors and had no system for tracking outstanding debts or upcoming payments. The situation wasn't as dire as Martha had feared, but it would require careful management to get through the winter until the spring cattle sales. She was deep in concentration when Fiona announced that lunch was ready. As they ate, Emma outlined what she'd found and her plans to reorganize the books. "You're a godsend, child," Martha declared. "Already I feel a weight lifting from my shoulders." After lunch, Emma continued working while Martha went to help with the foaling mare. By late afternoon, Emma's eyes were burning from the strain of deciphering her uncle's cramped handwriting. She decided to take a break and get some fresh air. Outside, the ranch was alive with activity. 2 men were mending a section of corral fence, while another led a horse through exercises in the training pen. Emma wandered toward the barn, drawn by the sound of voices. Inside, she found Martha and one of the hands, Jose. She recalled attending to a chestnut mare lying on a bed of straw. A tiny foal, still damp and wobbling, was attempting to stand beside its mother. "Isn't she beautiful?" Martha said, looking up as Emma approached. "A little filly, just what I was hoping for." Emma watched in wonder as the spindly-legged foal finally found its balance and took tentative steps toward its mother's head. The mare nickered softly, nuzzling her baby. "She's perfect," Emma said, moved by the scene. "This one's special," Martha told her. "Her sire is one of Xavier's horses, that big stallion he's been crossing with quarter horses. This little lady will be strong and fast when she grows up." She patted the mare's neck. "We'll call her Hope. Seems fitting." Emma spent the rest of the afternoon helping around the ranch, learning the rhythms and routines of her new home. By evening, she was pleasantly tired, her mind full of all she'd seen and learned. After dinner, she and Martha sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. "How do you like it so far?" Martha asked, rocking gently in her chair. "It's overwhelming," Emma admitted. "But in a good way. There's so much to learn, but I want to learn it all. Martha smiled. You'll fit right in, Emma. You've got your mother's spirit. She took a sip from her coffee cup. And speaking of fitting in, we need to get you some proper clothes. Those city dresses won't serve you well out here. Emma looked down at her skirts, already dusty from the day's activities. I suppose you're right. We'll go into town on Saturday, Martha decided. Get you outfitted properly. Maybe see if Eliza Wilson has any suitable riding clothes that can be altered. Her eyes twinkled. Might be Xavier would be willing to continue your riding lessons once you're properly outfitted. Emma felt her cheeks warm. Aunt Martha, you're matchmaking. Nonsense, Martha said, not looking the least bit innocent. Simply being practical. Every woman in these parts needs to ride, and who better to teach you than the best horseman in the county? She set down her cup. But if it happens that you two take a shine to each other in the process, well, that would just be a happy coincidence, wouldn't it? Despite her embarrassment, Emma found herself smiling. You're incorrigible. So your mother always said, Martha agreed cheerfully. Now let's turn in. Morning comes early on a ranch. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Emma continued organizing the ranch accounts while helping Fiona with household chores. By afternoon, she had created a new ledger system and written letters to several of the ranch's debtors politely, but firmly requesting payment. She was just sealing the last envelope when she heard hoofbeats in the yard. Looking out the window, her heart skipped when she recognized Xav dismounting from his chestnut gelding. He was dressed for work in worn denims, a faded blue shirt and chaps, with a leather vest and his ever-present hat. Even at a distance, there was no denying the man cut an impressive figure. Martha greeted him in the yard, and they spoke briefly before heading toward the corral where the hands were gathering cattle. Emma hesitated, then decided her books could wait. She changed into a simpler skirt and blouse, then headed outside. The autumn air was crisp but pleasant as Emma made her way to the corral. Xav was astride his horse now, working alongside Martha's men to separate calves from the herd. Emma watched, fascinated by the orchestrated chaos as riders guided their mounts with subtle signals, the horses responding with almost uncanny intelligence. Xav spotted her and raised a hand in greeting. He said something to one of the hands, then rode over to where Emma stood by the fence. "Afternoon, Miss Grayson," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Settling in all right, please call me Emma," she replied. "And yes, thank you. Everyone has been wonderfully welcoming." His smile warmed his eyes. "Glad to hear it. Martha says you've already worked miracles with the books." "Hardly miracles, just organization." She gestured toward the corral. "This is far more impressive. I've never seen anything like it. This," he glanced over his shoulder at the work continuing behind him. "Just routine fall roundup, getting the calves separated for market." He looked back at her, his expression turning thoughtful. "Would you like to learn more about it?" "I would very much," Emma said sincerely. "Tell you what," Xav said, "we'll be finished here in about an hour. After that, if you're interested, I could show you around a bit more of the ranch. Maybe give you that riding lesson Martha mentioned." Emma's eyes widened. "She told you about that?" Xav's smile turned a bit sheepish. "She might have suggested that you were interested in learning to ride properly." "Said it in front of all the hands, so I could hardly refuse without seeming impolite." His eyes held a hint of mischief. "Though between you and me, I would have volunteered anyway." The directness of his statement caught Emma off guard. In Boston, men spoke in layers of meaning and subtle implication. Xav's straightforward manner was refreshingly different. "In that case, I accept," she said. "Though I should warn you, I'm a complete novice." "Everyone starts somewhere," he replied easily. "I'll meet you back here when we're done." With a nod, he wheeled his horse around and rode back to the work at hand. Emma hurried back to the house to change. Fiona helped her find a divided skirt Martha kept for riding, and though it was a bit loose in the waist, it would serve the purpose. By the time she returned to the corral, the cattle work was finished, and Xav was waiting with 2 horses, Goliath and a smaller, dappled gray mare. "This is Willow," he said, patting the gray's neck. "She belongs to your aunt but hasn't been ridden much lately. Gentlest horse on the property, perfect for learning." He spent the next few minutes showing Emma how to approach and greet a horse properly, how to check the saddle, and finally how to mount correctly. With his hands at her waist, he boosted her up, then adjusted her stirrups and showed her how to hold the reins. "Back straight but relaxed," he instructed. "Move with the horse, not against her. That's it." For the next hour, they walked the horses slowly around the pasture, Xav patiently explaining the basics of horsemanship. Emma was a quick study, her initial nervousness giving way to enjoyment as she began to feel more secure in the saddle. "You're a natural," Xav told her as they returned to the barn. "Most beginners fight the horse. You're learning to work with her." "I have an excellent teacher," Emma replied, flushed with pleasure at his praise. As he helped her dismount, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a spark of connection that made Emma's breath catch. The moment was broken by Martha calling from the porch that supper would be ready soon. Xav stepped back, clearing his throat. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "For another lesson, I mean." "I'd like that," Emma answered, trying to keep her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Emma would spend her mornings working on the ranch books and helping with household tasks. In the afternoons, Xav would arrive, ostensibly to help with ranch work, but always making time for Emma's riding lessons. Under his tutelage, she progressed rapidly, moving from a walk to a trot, and finally to a canter. Each day, they would ride a little farther from the ranch house, Xav showing her different parts of the property, the creek that supplied their water, the high meadow where the best grazing was found, the aspen grove that turned brilliant gold in the autumn light. During these rides, they talked. Emma told him about growing up in Boston, her father's business, her mother's death from influenza the previous winter, followed too quickly by her father's passing. Xav spoke of his parents, his dreams for his horse breeding operation, and the challenges of ranching in Colorado's unpredictable climate. What began as formal riding lessons evolved into something more, a deepening friendship built on genuine interest and mutual respect. Xav never mentioned Emma's size or treated her as anything but a capable, intelligent woman. In his presence, the insecurities that had plagued her in Boston began to fade. On Saturday, as promised, Martha took Emma into Platteville to shop for more suitable clothing. The small town was bustling with weekend activity, ranchers and farmers coming in for supplies, families attending to weekly errands, cowboys enjoying their day off. At Eliza Wilson's dressmaking shop, Emma was fitted for 2 practical day dresses, a divided riding skirt of her own and several shirtwaists. Eliza, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, took her measurements without comment and promised the altered clothes would be ready the following week. "You'll want a proper hat, too," Martha declared, leading Emma to the mercantile. "That fancy bonnet won't do you any good under the Colorado sun." In the mercantile, they encountered Theodore Harrison for the first time. The banker was a tall, lean man with thinning hair and cold gray eyes. His tailored suit and gold watch chain marked him as wealthy by local standards. "Mrs. Wilkins," he greeted Martha with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a pleasure to see you in town." "Harrison," Martha replied curtly. "This is my niece, Emma Grayson." She's come from Boston to help me with the ranch. Harrison turned his assessing gaze on Emma. Miss Grayson, welcome to Platteville. His eyes held a calculating look that reminded Emma uncomfortably of Everett Bradford. I trust you're finding our little community to your liking. Very much so, Emma replied politely but coolly. Miss Grayson has taken over my accounts, Martha added. You'll be dealing with her regarding ranch business from now on. Something flickered in Harrison's eyes, annoyance perhaps, or recalculation. Indeed, how convenient. I look forward to discussing the terms of your loan with someone who understands the complexities of finance. I'll come by the bank next week, Emma told him, meeting his gaze steadily. I have some questions about the interest calculations on my aunt's last statement. Harrison's smile tightened. By all means. My door is always open to the ladies of Willow Creek Ranch. With a slight bow, he excused himself and moved to speak with the store owner. Slippery as an eel that one, Martha muttered as they moved away. Watch yourself around him, Emma. He's been trying to get his hands on our land for years. Why is he so interested in your ranch specifically? Emma asked. Martha's expression darkened. Water rights. Our creek is one of the most reliable water sources in the county. Control that, and you control all the surrounding ranches. She shook her head. William never trusted him, said Harrison was playing a long game, buying up land piece by piece. After finishing their shopping, they stopped at the small hotel restaurant for lunch. As they ate, Martha pointed out various townsfolk, giving Emma a rundown of the local personalities and politics. They were just finishing their meal when Xav entered the restaurant. He spotted them immediately, coming over to their table with a smile that made Emma's heart beat faster. Ladies, he greeted them, fancy meeting you here. As if you didn't know perfectly well we'd be in town today, Martha retorted good-naturedly. Sit down and join us for coffee, Xavier. He pulled out a chair, removing his hat as he sat. Just finished at the blacksmith's. New shoes for Goliath. His eyes met Emma's. How's the shopping going? Successfully, I think, Emma replied. Though I'm still adjusting to the idea of wearing trousers even if they're hidden under a skirt. You'll appreciate them the first cold day you have to ride, he assured her. Speaking of riding, I was thinking we might try a longer trail tomorrow if you're up for it. There's a spot about an hour's ride from your aunt's place, a lookout point with a view of the whole valley. Martha raised an eyebrow. You're talking about Lover's Leap, aren't you? Xav's cheeks reddened slightly. It's called Eagle Point, Martha. Not by anyone who grew up around here, Martha replied with a smirk, but it is a beautiful spot. Emma should see it. Emma felt her own face warming. I'd like that, she said to Xav, if you think I'm ready for a longer ride. You're more than ready, he assured her. You're a quick learner. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Theodore Harrison, who stopped by their table with the same insincere smile he'd worn at the Mercantile. Mrs. Wilkins, Miss Grayson, he nodded to them, then turned to Xav with noticeably less warmth. Larson. Harrison, Xav responded, his previously friendly expression cooling. I couldn't help overhearing that Miss Grayson has taken over the Willow Creek accounts, Harrison said smoothly. I wonder if she's been fully apprised of the situation. What situation would that be, Mr. Harrison? Emma asked, keeping her voice even. The banker's smile widened. Why, the terms of your aunt's loan, of course. The payment schedule has been rather irregular of late. I've been most accommodating, but business is business. As I said earlier, I'll be reviewing the accounts with you next week, Emma replied, including the interest rates, which seem to have fluctuated rather dramatically over the past year. Something hard flashed in Harrison's eyes before his smooth mask returned. Of course, I look forward to explaining our banking practices. Good day, ladies. With a curt nod to Xav, he moved on. "That man," Martha muttered after he was out of earshot, "always circling like a vulture." "He tried the same with my place last spring," Xav said, his expression grim. "Claimed there was a clause in my loan that allowed him to raise the rate during drought conditions." "Was there?" Emma asked. Xav's mouth quirked. "Buried in the fine print." "But I'd set aside extra from the good years, so I paid it off. He wasn't pleased." The conversation shifted to more pleasant topics, but Emma couldn't shake a sense of unease. Harrison clearly saw her as a complication in whatever plans he had for Willow Creek Ranch. She would need to be very careful in her dealings with him. The next day dawned clear and cool, perfect for riding. Emma dressed in her borrowed divided skirt and a warm shirtwaist, adding a jacket against the autumn chill. Her hair she braided and pinned up securely beneath a new wide-brimmed hat. Xav arrived mid-morning, leading both Goliath and a pretty sorrel mare. "Thought you might like to try Penny today," he explained as Emma came out to meet him. "She's a bit more spirited than Willow, but still gentle, good for longer trails." "Are you saying I'm ready to graduate from the beginner's horse?" Emma asked, pleased. "You've earned it," he replied with a smile. "You're a natural horsewoman, Emma." The warmth in his voice made her cheeks flush. She busied herself with checking the saddle as he'd taught her, then mounted with increasing confidence. Xav handed her a small packed bag. "Lunch," he explained, mounting Goliath. "Thought we might make a day of it if that suits you." "It suits me very well," Emma replied, settling into the saddle. They rode at an easy pace, following a trail that wound up into the foothills. The aspens were at the height of their autumn glory, their leaves shimmering gold in the sunlight. Twice they spotted deer watching them from the shelter of pine groves, and once a red-tailed hawk circled overhead. Emma found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, enjoying the quiet companionship. There was an ease between them now, a comfort in each other's presence that required no constant conversation. When they did speak, it was to point out a particularly beautiful view or an interesting bird or plant. After about an hour, the trail began to climb more steeply, winding up a ridge. "Almost there," Xav told her. "Just around this bend." The trail emerged onto a rocky promontory that jutted out over the valley. Emma gasped at the vista that suddenly opened before them. Miles of rolling grassland stretched below, the ribbon of Willow Creek winding through it, with the ranch buildings looking like miniature toys in the distance. Beyond, the plains extended toward the horizon, while behind them the mountains rose in majestic, snow-capped peaks. "Oh, Xav," she breathed. "It's magnificent." He dismounted and came to help her down. "Worth the ride." "Worth every minute," she assured him, unable to take her eyes from the view. "I've never seen anything so beautiful." They secured the horses to a pine tree and spread a blanket on a flat rock near the edge of the promontory. From his saddlebag, Xav produced the lunch Fiona had packed: cold chicken, biscuits, apples, and a jar of lemonade. As they ate, Xav pointed out landmarks: distant ranches, the stagecoach road to Denver, the mountains named for early explorers and native legends. "How far does your land extend?" Emma asked, trying to map the boundaries in her mind. "From that creek there," he pointed, "north about 3 miles and east to the old trading post road. Not as big as your aunt's spread, but enough for my horses." "It's a wonderful life you've built," Emma said sincerely. "You should be proud." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Most days I am." "It's hard work, but I wouldn't trade it." He hesitated. "What about you, Emma? Do you miss Boston, the city life?" She considered the question seriously. "I miss certain things. The bookshops, the concerts, some of my friends." She looked out over the vast landscape, but there was also so much. Constraint, rules about who you could speak to, how you should dress, what was considered proper for a woman of my station. She smiled wryly. And of course, constant reminders that I didn't fit the ideal of what a Boston society lady should look like. Zav's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Emma gestured to her figure. I've never been slender, Zav. In Boston, that was considered a failing in a young lady. I was constantly being advised about reducing diets and tighter corsets, as if my worth was measured by the circumference of my waist. Anger flashed in his eyes. That's absurd. Is it? She asked softly. Even here, my first experience was humiliation because a saddle wouldn't fit me. That wasn't, he broke off, clearly frustrated. Emma, that had nothing to do with your worth. It was just a practical matter of equipment. I know that now, she assured him. And I'm not fishing for compliments, truly. It's been refreshing to be somewhere that values competence over appearance. No one here seems to care that I'm not built like a fashion plate. Zav was quiet for a moment, his expression serious. Then he moved closer, taking her hand in his. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Emma Grayson. His voice was low, intense. I see a woman of incredible courage who left everything familiar to start fresh in a strange place. I see intelligence in your eyes, kindness in your smile, and a strength you probably don't even realize you possess. Emma's breath caught at the sincerity in his face. Zav. And yes, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, I see a beautiful woman. Not despite your curves, but because of them. Because they're part of who you are, and who you are is someone I've come to admire very much. The world seemed to still around them. Emma was acutely aware of the warmth of his hand holding hers, the blue of his eyes, the slight upturn at the corners of his mouth. Without conscious thought, she leaned toward him, and he met her halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative but deepened as Emma responded. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she felt herself melting into his touch. When they finally broke apart, both were slightly breathless. I've been wanting to do that since I first saw you, Zav admitted, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. Standing there at the depot, looking like you might take on the whole world single-handed. Emma laughed softly. I felt anything but brave. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, he said, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. It's facing that fear and moving forward anyway. You're the bravest person I know, Emma Grayson. They spent another hour at the lookout point, talking, occasionally stealing kisses and simply enjoying each other's company. The ride back to the ranch was filled with a new awareness, a sweet anticipation of what might be developing between them. When they reached Willow Creek, Martha was waiting on the porch. One look at their faces told her all she needed to know, and her pleased smile made Emma blush. Have a nice ride, Martha asked innocently. Very nice, Zav replied, his eyes on Emma. Eagle Point was at its best today. I'm sure it was, Martha said, not bothering to hide her knowing smirk. You'll stay for supper, won't you, Xavier, if I'm invited, he said. You know you always are, Martha told him. Especially now. Over the next few weeks, Emma settled fully into ranch life. Her riding improved daily, and she took over more responsibilities around the ranch, including accompanying the hands on short cattle drives and helping with the horses. The accounts were now in perfect order, though what she discovered in the ledgers was concerning the ranch was profitable, but barely so after the high interest payments to Harrison's bank. Her relationship with Zav deepened with each passing day. He began coming to the ranch more frequently, often staying for dinner, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy. Wildflowers gathered on the ride over, once a beautiful hand-tooled leather belt he'd made himself. They rode together nearly every day, exploring the land, talking about everything and nothing. Emma found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone before. She told him about the loneliness of her childhood as an only child, about her father's absorption in business and her mother's declining health, about her brief, disastrous courtship with Everett Bradford. In return, Xav shared his hopes and dreams, his fears and doubts. He spoke of his parents with love and respect, of the hard years building his horse breeding operation, of his determination to create something lasting. As October gave way to November, a new routine developed. Sundays, when ranch work was kept to a minimum, became their special day. After church in Platteville, they would ride to different spots. Xav wanted to show her a hidden waterfall, a stand of ancient pines, once even to his own ranch, where he proudly showed her his breeding stock and the new barn he was building. It was after one such Sunday excursion, as they sat beside a small creek watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, that Xav took her hand. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "about the future, about us." Emma's heart quickened. "Have you?" He nodded, his eyes serious. "I know it hasn't been long, Emma, barely 2 months since you arrived, but I've never felt this way about anyone before." He took a deep breath. "I'm not a wealthy man. My ranch is small compared to some, and I work hard for everything I have. But what I have is yours if you want it, if you want me." Emma felt tears welling in her eyes. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Xavier Larson?" A smile spread across his face, the smile that never failed to make her heart skip. "I'm asking if you'll marry me, Emma Grayson. If you'll build a life with me here." "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Xav, I will." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and passion and future. When they broke apart, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment," he confessed, tipping a ring into his palm. It was a simple design, a small but perfect diamond set in gold, with tiny engraved leaves on either side. "It was my mother's. She made me promise I'd only give it to a woman who was strong enough for this life and kind enough to make it worth living." As he slipped it onto her finger, Emma felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. This was where she belonged, with this man in this place. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, eager to share their news with Martha. The older woman's delight was evident as she hugged them both, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have wished for a better match," she declared. "When will the wedding be?" They decided on Christmas Eve, giving them time to prepare, but not so long that they had to endure an extended engagement. The news spread quickly through the small community, and Emma was touched by the genuine good wishes that came from their neighbors. Even Theodore Harrison, when they encountered him in town, offered stiff congratulations, though his eyes remained cold and calculating. The only cloud on their happiness was Harrison's continued pressure regarding the ranch loan. Emma had discovered several discrepancies in his calculations and had written to a lawyer in Denver for advice. The banker seemed increasingly agitated during their meetings, insisting that a payment would be due in full by the end of December, coincidentally, just after their wedding date. "He's trying to force our hand," Martha said grimly when Emma reported this. "Knows once you and Xavier are married, you'll have more resources to fight him." "But we have the law on our side," Emma insisted. "His interest calculations are clearly usurious. The lawyer in Denver confirmed it." Martha sighed. "Law moves slowly, Emma. Harrison knows that. He's counting on us not having the cash to make the payment while we wait for legal remedies." The solution came from an unexpected quarter. One crisp November morning, a rider arrived at the ranch, a distinguished-looking gentleman in his 60s, accompanied by a younger man who was clearly his son. They introduced themselves as James and Thomas Carroll, cattle buyers from Chicago. "We've heard good things about Willow Creek stock," the elder Carol explained over coffee in Martha's sitting room. "Looking to improve our breeding lines before winter sets in." They spent the day touring the ranch, examining the cattle, asking informed questions about bloodlines and feed programs. By evening, they had made an offer for 20 of Martha's best breeding bulls, an offer far above the usual market price. "It's a fair deal for both of us," James Carroll insisted when Emma expressed surprise at the generous terms. "Quality stock is worth paying for, and these animals will improve our herd significantly. The sale would provide enough cash to make the bank payment with money to spare." Emma couldn't help but feel that their financial troubles were miraculously solved, until she noticed a peculiar exchange of glances between the Carrolls and Xav during dinner. Later, after their guests had retired to the guest rooms, Emma confronted Xav on the porch. "Those aren't really cattle buyers from Chicago, are they?" she asked quietly. "At least, that's not why they're here." Xav had the grace to look sheepish. "They are legitimate businessmen," he defended. "James Carroll owns one of the largest meat packing operations in Chicago." "But," Emma prompted, "but he's also my mother's cousin," Xav admitted. "I might have written to him about Harrison's tactics and suggested Willow Creek had some exceptional breeding stock available." Emma wasn't sure whether to be angry or touched. "Xav, we can't accept charity." "It's not charity," he insisted. "Every word they said about the quality of the stock is true. They're getting value for their money." He took her hands in his. "But yes, the timing of their visit isn't coincidental. James has been looking to expand his operations for years, and he despises men like Harrison who use financial manipulation to acquire land." Emma sighed. "You should have told me." "Would you have agreed if I had?" he asked, knowing the answer. "Probably not," she conceded. "My pride would have gotten in the way." He kissed her lightly. "That's why I didn't tell you. This is a business transaction that happens to benefit everyone involved. Harrison doesn't get to sink his claws into Willow Creek. Your aunt keeps her ranch, and the Carrolls get excellent breeding stock." His eyes twinkled. "And I get to marry the most beautiful, stubborn woman in Colorado without a bank foreclosure hanging over our heads." Put that way, Emma could hardly maintain her indignation. "You're impossible," she told him, but there was no heat in the words. "That's not what you said when I proposed," he reminded her, pulling her close. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Emma wrote to her few remaining friends in Boston, sharing her happiness. She and Martha traveled to Denver to shop for a wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory satin with lace trim. Eliza Wilson was commissioned to make Emma's going-away outfit, a practical but flattering traveling suit in deep blue wool. Meanwhile, work continued on Xav's ranch. With the help of friends and neighbors, he expanded the main house, adding a larger kitchen and a second bedroom for the future, he said with a meaningful look that made Emma blush. They chose furniture together, mixing pieces from both their pasts: a writing desk that had been Emma's mother's, chairs built by Xav's father, a new bed ordered from Denver. As Christmas approached, snow began to dust the hills, transforming the landscape into a glittering wonderland. The temperature dropped, but inside Willow Creek Ranch, warmth and anticipation filled every corner. Martha outdid herself decorating for both the holiday and the wedding, with evergreen boughs and red ribbons adorning the mantels and staircase. 3 days before the wedding, Theodore Harrison made one last attempt to derail their happiness. He appeared at the ranch unannounced, his face a mask of barely contained anger. "I understand congratulations are in order," he said coldly, after Martha reluctantly invited him in. "Not just for the upcoming nuptials, but also for your unexpected financial windfall." "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," Emma replied evenly. We were pleased that the quality of Willow Creek cattle was recognized by such prominent buyers. Harrison's eyes narrowed. Indeed, most fortuitous timing. One might almost suspect some arrangement. Are you implying something, Mr. Harrison? Martha asked sharply. Merely observing that it's unusual for Chicago buyers to appear just when you most needed capital, he replied smoothly. But no matter. Business is business, and you'll have the payment ready by the end of the month, I trust. It will be delivered to your bank tomorrow, Emma informed him. In full, including the legitimate interest as calculated by our lawyer in Denver. The banker's face tightened. I hope you're not suggesting my calculations were incorrect, Miss Grayson. Not at all, Emma said with a sweet smile. I'm stating it directly. Our lawyer has identified several instances of compound interest being applied where simple interest was specified in the original agreement. We'll be paying the correct amount, Mr. Harrison, not a penny more or less. For a moment, Harrison's mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. Then, with visible effort, he regained his composure. Very well. I'll accept the payment under protest, pending review by my own legal counsel. As you wish, Emma replied, unmoved. Will there be anything else, Mr. Harrison? We're rather busy with wedding preparations. With a curt nod, the banker departed, his rigid back expressing his anger more eloquently than words. That man will bear watching, Martha observed after he'd gone. He doesn't strike me as the type to accept defeat gracefully. But even Harrison's unpleasantness couldn't dampen their spirits for long. The following day, the payment was delivered to the bank as promised, and the receipt carefully filed away in Emma's meticulously organized accounts. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow sparkling in the morning sun. The ranch was bustling with activity from dawn, as neighbors and friends arrived to help with final preparations. The main room of the ranch house had been transformed for the ceremony, with evergreen boughs, red berries, and white candles creating a festive atmosphere. In Martha's bedroom, Emma stood before the mirror while her aunt and Fiona helped her dress. The ivory satin gown fitted perfectly, accentuating her curves rather than attempting to disguise them. Her hair was arranged in an elegant upsweep, with small white flowers tucked into the curls. You look beautiful, child, Martha said, blinking back tears as she fastened a strand of pearls around Emma's neck. Absolutely beautiful. Do you think Xav will think so? Emma asked, a flutter of last-minute nerves making her voice uncertain. Martha squeezed her hand. That man looks at you like you're the sun, moon, and stars all rolled into one. Trust me, he'll think you're the most beautiful bride who ever walked the earth. A knock at the door announced the arrival of James Carroll, who would be giving Emma away in the absence of her father. It's time, ladies, he called. The minister's ready, and the groom is about to wear a hole in the floor with his pacing. Emma took a deep breath, gathering her courage along with her bouquet of winter greenery and dried flowers. This was the beginning of her new life. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Emma would always remember the look on Xav's face when she entered the room on James Carroll's arm, a look of such love and wonder that it brought tears to her eyes. She would remember the warm strength of his hands holding hers as they spoke their vows, the tender kiss they shared as husband and wife, and the cheers that erupted from their assembled friends. The celebration afterwards was everything a country wedding should be: abundant food, music from local fiddle players, dancing that continued well into the night. Emma moved through it all in a haze of happiness, scarcely believing that this was her life now, that this wonderful man was her husband, that these kind, accepting people were her community. As the evening wore on, Xav drew her aside, away from the music and laughter. happy, Mrs. Larson?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she loved. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" In response, he kissed her, a kiss that held promise and passion and a lifetime of tomorrows. "Let's go home," he whispered against her lips. They slipped away amid good-natured teasing from the wedding guests, riding in a sleigh Xav had borrowed for the occasion, wrapped in warm blankets against the winter night. The stars overhead were brilliant diamonds in the clear sky, and the runners whispered over the new snow as they made their way to what was now their home. Xav carried her over the threshold, setting her down in the warm parlor where a fire waited, banked low but ready to blaze. As he added logs to the fire, Emma looked around at what would now be her home, the sturdy furniture, the colorful quilts, the bookshelves Xav had built especially for her collection. "Welcome home, Emma," he said, coming to stand beside her, his arm sliding around her waist. "I hope it pleases you." She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "It's perfect. Everything I could have wished for." Later, much later, as they lay tangled together in the new bed, Emma's head resting on Xav's chest while he stroked her hair, she found herself thinking of the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. The financial disaster that had forced her from Boston, the humiliation at the livery stable, Xav's kind solution with Goliath, all of it had led to this moment of perfect contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Xav asked softly. "How grateful I am that the first saddle didn't fit," she replied honestly. He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly under her ear. "I've been grateful for that every day since." "Really?" she asked, raising her head to look at him. "Really," he confirmed, his eyes warm in the firelight. "If it had, some other cowboy might have escorted you to your aunt's, and I would have missed the chance to meet the love of my life." 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on the valley, turning the grasslands golden and warming the breeze that rustled through the cottonwoods along Willow Creek. Emma sat on the wide porch of the ranch house, shelling peas into a bowl while keeping a watchful eye on the children playing in the yard. 4-year-old William, named for Emma's uncle, and the spitting image of his father with the same bright blue eyes and ready smile, was showing his younger sister how to pet the new kittens that had been born in the barn. At 2.5, Margaret Maggie to everyone was all curiosity and determination, her chestnut curls bouncing as she carefully stroked the tiny orange tabby under her brother's supervision. From inside the house came the sound of Martha's voice, teaching 10-year-old Louis, the son of one of their ranch hands, his letters. Since retiring and turning the running of Willow Creek over to Emma and Xav, Martha had appointed herself schoolteacher to all the children on the ranch, insisting they receive proper education. The past 5 years had brought many changes to their lives. After their marriage, Xav had moved to Willow Creek, combining his horse breeding operation with Martha's cattle ranch. Under their joint management, both enterprises had flourished. Emma's financial acumen, Xav's horse expertise, and Martha's lifetime of ranching knowledge had proved a formidable combination. They'd faced challenges, of course. Theodore Harrison had continued his attempts to acquire their land, using increasingly underhanded tactics. But the community had rallied around them, and eventually Harrison had overreached, attempting to foreclose on several properties based on fraudulent documentation. When his schemes were exposed, he had fled Platteville just ahead of the law, reportedly ending up in San Francisco. The ranch itself had grown. They now employed 8 full-time hands and additional seasonal workers during Roundup. The horse breeding program had gained national recognition, with Xav's specially developed line of strong, intelligent, endurance horses in high demand from Texas to Montana. Emma's careful management had turned the once struggling ranch into one of the most profitable in the county. But their greatest treasures were their children. William had been born after a difficult but ultimately successful pregnancy. His arrival greeted with joyous celebration by the entire community. Maggie had followed less than 2 years later, arriving with characteristic impatience 3 weeks before she was expected, during one of the worst blizzards in memory. Xav had been forced to deliver her himself, with only Martha's guidance, as the doctor had been unable to reach them through the snow. The sound of hoofbeats drew Emma's attention. Looking up, she spotted Xav riding in from the north pasture, his tall figure as straight and strong as the day they'd met. Her heart still quickened at the sight of him, even after 5 years of marriage. He dismounted in the yard, lifting his hat to wipe his brow in the summer heat. The children spotted him and ran with cries of delight, William reaching him first with Maggie tottering determinedly behind. Xav scooped them both up, one in each arm, spinning them around as they squealed with laughter. Emma set aside her peas and went to join them, smiling at the picture they made her handsome husband with their beautiful children, their faces alight with love and joy. "How are my best girls and my best boy?" Xav asked, setting the children down to greet his wife with a kiss that, even after all this time, still made her toes curl. "We're well," Emma replied, smoothing his sweat-dampened hair back from his forehead. "How was the inspection of the North Range?" "Good grass, plenty of water," he reported. "The new foal is doing fine, too. That bloodline from the Morgan stallion is proving its worth." They walked together to the porch, the children dancing around them, eager to tell their father about their day, William's adventure finding the kittens, Maggie's achievement of counting to 10 all by herself. As they settled on the porch steps, Emma leaned against Xav's solid shoulder, contentment washing over her. This was her life now, this beautiful ranch, these precious children, this man who had seen past her insecurities to the person she truly was. "Happy?" Xav asked quietly, his arm around her waist, echoing the question he'd asked on their wedding night and many times since. Emma looked around at her home, at their children playing in the yard, at the land stretching away toward the mountains. She thought of the day she'd arrived in Platteville, frightened and alone, too heavy for an ordinary saddle. And she thought of the extraordinary cowboy who'd found a stronger horse, and in doing so, had given her the strength to find herself. "Perfectly," she answered, turning to kiss him in the golden afternoon light. "Perfectly happy."